Vision is the dominant sense for most people with sight. The organ of sight is the eye. Think of it as a slightly irregular, hollow sphere that takes in light and translates it into images. If we enlarge the eye and look inside it, we can discover how that's done. Inside the eye are various structures working together to create an image the brain can understand. Among these are the cornea, a clear dome-like structure covering the iris or colored part of the eye, the lens directly below it, and the retina, which lines the back of the eye. The retina consists of thin layers of light-sensitive tissue. This candle can help us understand how the eye captures images and then sends them to the brain. First, the candlelight passes through the cornea. As it does, it's bent or refracted onto the lens. As the light passes through the lens, it's bent a second time. Finally, it arrives at the retina, where an image is formed. This double bending, though, has reversed the image and turned it upside down. If that was the end of the story, the world would always appear upside down. Fortunately, the image is turned right side up in the brain. Before that can happen, the image needs to travel as impulses along the optic nerve and enter the brain's occipital lobe. When the image forms there, it regains its proper perspective.
5 strange facts about the human eye. And make sure you stay until the end, because the last fact will blow your mind. Number 5, blue eyes. We have all seen them before, on someone. Maybe a family member. Or maybe when we look in the mirror. But if you have blue eyes, then you are only a member of what is a recent genetic mutation. For blue eyes were part of a mutation that occurred only 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. To put that in perspective, brown eyes have been around since the beginning of humans, and that is about 200,000 years. Hans Heiberg from the Department of Cellular and Molecular Medicine at the University of Copenhagen states that, originally, we all had brown eyes. But a genetic mutation affecting the ACAR2 gene in our chromosomes resulted in the creation of a switch, which literally turned off the ability to produce brown eyes. But in the end, whatever eye color you have, and whatever shape, we all sooner or later cry, which brings us to number 4. Our tears. When you cry, your tears are not the same as when you yawn or when something irritates your eye. They have a different composition. In fact, different tears, that is, tears of joy or tears of sadness, even look different from each other. In fact, one woman named Rose Fisher proved this by taking different pictures of tears under a microscope. She studied 100 different tears and found that the tears that come about from hard laughter aren't even near to the tears of sorrow. Like a drop of water, each tiny teardrop carries a microcosm of human experience. Her project is called the Topography of Tears. Each picture is taken from a different tear, and they have a different structure. You can tell just by looking at them, the difference between pain and laughter. It is quite amazing. Number 3, your retinas don't see the world the way you think they do. In fact, you see the world upside down. It is your brain that flips the image right side up, so the world looks the way it should. Which gives rise to the question, if the brain flips the image right side up, without us even knowing it, then what other ways does it fix the image that is coming through our eyes? Well, it also unscrambles the image, because the image that comes to your eyes is split in half. Your brain puts 2 halves of the image back together. It also fixes the problem that you cannot really see the color red. That's right, if it is your favorite color, it is a figment of your brain. Your retinas cannot detect the color red at all. It is your brain that blends the color together in order to make it, because your retinas cannot record it at all. Number 2, men and women are not equal. The eyes of women and men, at least how they see the world, is much different. In fact, the brains of women and men process colors in different ways. New research has shown that if both sexes look at the color orange, for example, that men will see a redder version of orange than a woman will see. That is, a woman will see a lighter version of orange. This is the same for many colors, but you can take the color green for example. A woman will see a much greener color of green, whereas a man will see a dark color of green. Researcher Professor Israel Abramov states that differences between the sexes' color vision cannot be explained by differences in the structure of the eye. Therefore, the answer must lie in the way the brain processes information taken in by the eye. Number 1. Eyes are a doorway to the soul. Recent research made by vision researcher Giovanni Caputo from the University of Urbino in Italy has shown that staring into the human eye, either your own eye in a mirror, or the eye of another person, changes the consciousness of humans. Forget hard drugs. If you stare into your own eye, it is much cheaper and better for your health. A few years ago, researcher Giovanni Caputo recruited 50 volunteers and got them to look at their reflections in a mirror for 10 minutes in a dimly lit room. For many of them, it took less than 1 minute to start experiencing something very strange. Their faces began to warp and change, taking on the appearance of animals, monsters, or even deceased family members, a phenomenon imaginatively named the strange face illusion. But it seems the effects are even more strange when the mirror is swapped for another person. According to the British Psychological Society, those in the group that faced one, looking into the eyes of another person 3 feet away, experienced higher levels of attenuated color intensity, with noises also seeming louder than they should. Time seemed to slow down and they felt their minds empty of all thoughts. Additionally, almost all of them said their partner's face appeared deformed. 2/3 saw monstrous beings and 15% even saw traits of a relative's face emerge on their partner. So I guess the eyes are really a window to the soul. Or maybe something else. Or maybe something else. Or maybe something else.
You guys, the Earth is either a lens or it's flat. I showed you the inner eye, but it is not a globe. But it is not a globe.
Enter the stars, and we found something that's simply incredible. We found that the shape of the universe exists inside of the eye. From eclipses of the moon, we found the sun. We found the rainbows. We also found the floating planets above us in the stillness. We found the 4 muscles of the eye, which are the 4 pillars of the world, as well as hell, the iris below, the pupil, the dark pit, and there's so much more, and I can't wait to show each and every one of you. You see, the secrets of the universe were staring us in the eyes the whole time. And why would we ever doubt that? The creator of our universe encoding the very secrets of that universe within his own creation. That is the only way he could actually prove without being able to have us interact with him, because we've been cut off. It was the only way he could prove to us who he was, by seeing everything around us and comparing it to our own creation, what is inside of us. That is the only way that God could ever prove it in the way that some people need it to be proven to them. Those who don't have faith and those that continue to deny what is right in their eyes will ultimately be cut off.
The 6th angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming up from the 4 horns of the golden altar that is before God. The 4 horns of the golden altar that is before God. And this is the cerebellum, the underside of the brain. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud and a rainbow upon his head. And its face were the sun, and its feet were pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little open book. And he had set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot upon the earth. Now these other 4 bands of muscles coming in around the eye are the 4 angels at the 4 corners of the earth, with the 4 winds mentioned in Revelation. But this other angel coming out of the east fits the description of this muscle exactly. The little book is the trochlea. The trochlea, a bone that holds in this muscle here. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven. Lifted up his hand to heaven, the hand holding the book, and swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which therein, that there should be time no longer, but in the days of the voice of the 7th angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. And the voice which I heard from heaven spake unto me again, and said, Go, and take the little book which is open in the hand of the angel which standeth upon the sea and upon the earth. And I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it, eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, and it shall be in thy mouth as sweet as honey. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. The 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks. The 2 candlesticks and the 2 olive trees, as you can see here. Here are the trunks of the olive trees and the tops. And here are the 2 candlesticks standing before the throne of God.
And we are so close to finding the ultimate truth. I want to recommend this video. There are no forests on flat earth. Wake up. What you're looking at is a cross-section of a flax stalk, and you're seeing that this person is comparing the various stalks or seeming stalks around the earth. Flat mesa surfaces with columns of hexagonal beams squashed together, just like the stalk, And this is simply amazing, because I believe now that we have another very specific piece to the puzzle, that these stalks that are coming up out of the earth, coated in a skin just like the skin inside of the flax stalk, I believe that these were all hyaloid canals, conduits to heaven, And this is just simply amazing because this was the missing piece to the puzzle. And I told you guys before that there were these structures around the earth, which is what you're seeing on your screen, coming up out of the ground. They look like stumps, as this YouTuber describes here. They look like stumps, except they're all cut off. Now, we talked about this lens here in the eye, and then when you cut right through the center, just like this, you get a cross section of a honeycomb matrix. We also talked about the different areas around the earth. The Devil's Postpile in Mammoth and Giant's Causeway in Scotland, and how these large hexagonal features were coming up out of the ground, confirming the cross-section theory of the earth here, that this convex lens is where we live. We also told you about the dome being the firmament, and that this was depicted in the Hunger Games when Katniss shoots her arrow, her arc, with a string attached to it, the hyaloid canal, into the firmament dome, which is all hexagonal. Just exactly what you're seeing on your screen on the left. And I will put a link in the description for that video that you're watching. And we understand that when you do a cross section of the rods and cones that line this inner eye here, it also looks like a hexagonal honeycomb matrix. And this is the prison, you guys. But it goes even deeper, because you're wondering, why are they all cut off? As this gentleman is demonstrating in this video, why are all these stumps cut off? And I believe that it is because we have been cut off from heaven because we've fallen into sin. And these may have even been the conduits by which we had access to heaven before the fall of man. Jack and the Beanstalk comes to mind, a knockoff story of a giant and a conduit to the heavens. Now, this is amazing because I don't think anyone's ever looked at this before, you guys. But this gentleman helped me put some more of the puzzle pieces together. Now, this is huge because it mimics birth. This hyaloid canal is the umbilical cord. And just like the umbilical cord in the womb for the child, this hyaloid canal disappears after birth. It falls away because its only purpose in vitro, or in the womb, was to feed the lens and develop the lens of the fetus inside the womb. And once the fetus is born, this disappears and only a remnant is left. And some people see that as floaters. So you see, we are now seeing more pieces to the puzzle, and the kingdom of heaven is within. We look inside to find the answers, and that's why this hyaloid canal is going from the outside to the inside. This is the narrow gate. This is the Red Sea. This is the wilderness. This is the flood. And over again, God was trying to show us the truth. And here we see the side-by-side that this YouTuber puts together for us that so effectively shows that these, in fact, do look like tree stumps. And on your right, you're looking at the rings of certain trees that seem to resemble the honeycomb matrix that we've been talking about. Were these conduits to heaven? Was this the fall of man? Possibly the angels at the gate guarding the garden? Was this an ancient forest of trees going to heaven? These are the questions that will become clear in the coming days as we continue to try to fight to find the truth. Why do we fight to find the truth? Why are we so relentless in our search? Because we know deep down in our heart that we've been lied to. We know we've been lied to. And we know that the truth is out there. And the controllers of this world do not want us to find it. We know who rules this realm. We know who rules this realm. And therefore we know that there are other answers and other ways for us to find the truth, if only we want it bad enough, if only we seek it. Now, what is the hyaloid canal? And how does that fit in with what we're talking about? Well, I'm going to show you. This is the hyaloid canal, the narrow gate. And 40 days and 40 nights was the flood, and 40 years the Israelites were in the wilderness, and 40 days Jesus was in the wilderness. And I believe this is the wilderness here. The child in the womb for 40 weeks. It all fits together, you guys. He was trying to show us the truth. The hyaloid artery is a branch of the ophthalmic artery, which is itself a branch of the internal carotid artery. It is even calling it a branch, like a tree. It is contained within the optic stalk. That's like Jack and the Beanstalk, the stalk of the eye. The branches extend from the optic disc through the vitreous humor to the lens. The optic disc being the back here, and then the lens extending through the vitreous humor through the wilderness. Usually fully regressed before birth. Its purpose is to supply nutrients to the developing lens in the growing fetus. We are born then into sin. It is cut off, just like the images we're seeing around the world. And that is fascinating. During the 10th week of development in humans, the lens grows independent of the blood supply, and the hyaloid artery usually regresses. Its proximal portion remains as the central artery of the retina. The central artery of the retina, through which all vision comes through the central artery of the retina. Regression of the hyaloid artery leaves a clear central zone. This is the narrow gate through the vitreous humor called the hyaloid canal. Occasionally, the artery may not fully regress, resulting in the condition persistent hyaloid artery. More commonly, small remnants of the artery may remain. The remnant of Israel passing through the Red Sea, the remnant of mankind passing through the flood on Noah's Ark, and the remnant of God's seed, Jesus, passing through the wilderness for 40 days. Free remnants can sometimes be seen as floaters. An anterior remnant of the hyaloid artery can be seen in some people as Mittendorf's dot, a small pinpoint-like scar on the posterior surface of the lens. A posterior remnant may be seen where the artery left the optic disc and is known as Burgmeister's papilla. The Burgmeister's papilla is the remnant of the artery left on the optic disc, which looks probably a lot like this. And you can't make this up, you guys. This is the truth. And we will keep our eyes peeled. No pun intended. I believe we're getting closer to solving the secrets of this universe. Now, what you're looking at is a view from Kenya, Africa. And standing at exactly the equator, the stars in the middle of your view, the middle of the zenith, will move in exactly a straight line. But when you look to the right of the sky, the stars will travel in a direction opposite than the side over here on this side. One is going counterclockwise and one is going clockwise, and in the middle it's going straight up and down. How can this be? Somehow the image that we're seeing in the sky is a reflection or a refraction, which completely explains the reversal of the moon being upside down, the sun being upside down, the stars moving in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. Let's take a look. What we're looking at is a mirror effect of some kind, or a refraction of some kind of lens. Now this is interesting. This was a post by Casey Chan. I'm going to play a portion of this video. This will blow your mind. This is taken inside of a perfect mirror globe, as if you were standing inside a reflecting mirror that surrounded you like a sphere. I don't have all the answers, you guys, but I know what I see when I look at this image. And what we're looking at is reflections and refractions of an image. And we don't see this miracle with stop motion photography that is happening before our eyes. This is the image through a raindrop, and it is completely turned upside down. And when you start to think of things in these terms, then you start to understand that maybe we're looking at a reflection. Let's take a look at this short video.
But don't get too enamored with your reflection, because mirrors don't show you as you really are.
Now what this man was demonstrating is that when you're standing in exactly the middle of this mirror globe, that you see your face fully in your reflection. But then when you step away from it, from the center backwards, you flip upside down. But when you approach the side of the mirror from the middle inside, you are right side up. So in effect, it is mimicking the image that we're seeing here as we're looking at the night sky from the equator only. When you're in the northern hemisphere, the stars go only one direction and they spin. And if you were to step over a few feet in the southern hemisphere, they spin in the opposite direction. I looked at some scriptures in the Bible to see if I could get any more clues. And it says here, or darkness that can't see, and abundance of water cover thee. Is not God in the height of heaven? And behold the height of the stars, how high they are. And thou sayest, how does God know? Can he judge through the dark cloud? Thick clouds are a covering to him, that he seeth not, and he walketh in the circuit of heaven. Now this is the King James Version. Praise him, ye heavens of heavens, and ye waters that be above the heavens.
Are there some kind of waters above the heavens that are reflecting this image to us? If any of you have any experience with lenses and domes, mirrors that would create this kind of effect on a given surface, please come forward and let's brainstorm and talk about it. So I dug a little deeper into the scriptures, and I saw how Lucifer fell from heaven, possibly as a star, and how he said, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Maybe in this water region that we just saw in the last verse. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Now, for those of you that believe in God and have faith in Jesus Christ in the Bible, and take it as the indelible doctrine of the Creator, the Bible is clear, and God doesn't make mistakes. The sun is what stands still, not the earth. If the earth was rotating around the sun, he would say that the earth stood still, and that is what caused the sun to stop in the sky. Instead, in these 3 Bible verses, the sun and the moon stand still in their habitation. Not the earth stops spinning. Again, God doesn't make mistakes. Now let's get into the book of Enoch and see what it has to say. And Enoch confirms here that it is the stars and the moon and the sun that are moving, not the earth. By his oath, the sun and moon complete their progress, never swerving from the command given to them forever and ever. By this oath, the stars complete their progress. We see clearly here that everything exists on winds, and that is what governs the movement of heavenly bodies, as well as the clouds of the earth. They're on separate wind tracks, as it says here. I surveyed the receptacles of all the winds, perceiving that they contributed to adorn the whole creation, and to preserve the foundation of the earth. I surveyed the stone which supports the corners of the earth. Now it uses the word corners, so we have to be careful here. I also beheld the 4 winds which bear up the earth in the firmament of heaven, and I beheld the winds occupying the exalted sky, the heavens, arising in the midst of heaven and of earth, and constituting the pillars of heaven. I saw the winds which turn the sky, which cause the orb of the sun and all of the stars to set, or to move around the sky. And over the earth I saw the winds which support the clouds. So 2 separate wind tracks. I perceived at the extremity of the earth the firmament of heaven above it. Then I passed on toward the south. So he started in the north, and he saw the firmament of heaven. Firmament of heaven, which means heaven is firm, just like the earth is firm. Then I passed on toward the south. Then he gives more descriptions of what he saw in the south. Now this is interesting because Enoch talks about the stars, and that this place until the consummation of heaven and earth will be the prison of the stars and the host of heaven. Up above this firmament, the stars which roll over fire are those which transgressed the commandment of God before their time arrived, for they came not in their proper season. Therefore was he offended with them and bound them until the period of the consummation of their crimes in the secret year. So basically, there is a time where there will be a consummation between heaven and earth, and we know that. And the firmament between us will be erased, is what Enoch is saying here, which is, to me, it's fascinating, because it could explain how the image of the stars is reflected, and we are seeing an image of it rather than the actual stars themselves. And as we read on in Enoch, we see the truth about why the heavens were made. They were made for us, so that we could see God's glory. They were made for man, not for the universe and infinite planets and infinite other things. It was made for man. and that there were 3 heavenly gates. It says here, through each of these small gates the stars of heaven passed on and proceeded toward the west by a path which was seen by them, and that at every period of their appearance, when I beheld them, I blessed. Every time is which they appeared, I blessed the Lord of glory, who had made these great and splendid signs, that they might display the magnificence of his works to angels and to the souls of men, and that these might glorify all his works and operations, might see the effect of his power, might glorify the great labor of his hands, and bless him forever. And here is the hope, and here is why we are a little bit different. In his presence he existed, and has revealed to the saints and to the righteous the wisdom of the Lord of spirits. For he has preserved the lot of the righteous, because they have hated and rejected the world of iniquity, and have detested all its works and ways, in the name of the Lord of spirits. We don't love this world. We love the Lord of the spirits, God, and for that we will be hated. And in those last days, the saints and the chosen shall undergo a change. The light of day shall rest upon them, and the splendor and glory of the saints shall be changed. And the day of trouble, evil, shall be heaped up upon sinners. But the righteous shall triumph in the name of the Lord of spirits. Others shall be made to see that they must repent and forsake the works of their hands, and that glory awaits them, not in the presence of the Lord of spirits, yet that by his name they be saved. The Lord of spirits will have compassion on them, for great is his mercy, and righteousness is in his judgment, in the presence of his glory. Nor in his judgment shall iniquity stand. He who repents not before him shall perish. Henceforth I will not have mercy on them, saith the Lord of spirits. So everyone will be given a final chance to see the miracle of God's glory before the end. And the thoughts of those who dwell on the earth shall transgress within them, and they shall be perverted in all their ways. They shall transgress and think themselves gods, while evil shall be multiplied among them. And the punishment shall come upon them, so that all of them shall be destroyed. Now, just before this verse, Enoch talks about how everything in the sky is going to change, and that the seasons will be late, and fruit won't bear from trees. Now, anytime we hear a star falling in heaven or in the book of Enoch, it falls from heaven to earth. How can that be if the stars are billions of miles away and could fall and destroy planets? How can that be that these stars fall from heaven to earth all the time in the book of Enoch in the Bible? And here, Enoch tells us what the stars are, all called by their respective names. In a righteous balance I saw it. He weighed out their light, the amplitude of their places, in the day of their appearance and their conversion. Splendor produced splendor, and their conversion was into the number of angels and of the faithful. We and the angels are represented in the stars. Then I inquired of the angel who proceeded with me, and explained to me secret things, what their names were. He answered, a similitude of those has the Lord of spirits shown thee. They are the names of the righteous who dwell upon the earth, and who believe in the name of the Lord of spirits forever and ever. Now we can understand why the morning star signified the coming of Jesus. And now we can understand why Lucifer fell like lightning from heaven. And there was a time when all the morning stars sang together, or all the stars sang together in heaven, before the fall of Lucifer. Do you see how all this can start to fit together? And now as you view the image of the inside of a spoon and the outside of the spoon, and you realize that they spin or are in opposite directions, I now want you to look at this papyrus symbol, ancient Egyptian. And imagine that this is one spoon, the outer edge, and that this is the other image with the inner spoon. And that one is going the other direction than the other. But at the equator, at this line, they appear to be going straight across. And here, they're moving in one direction, and down here, they're moving in another. This is ancient Egyptian papyrus. Did they know something that we don't? And God is simply amazing. In researching further into the dung beetle, just after the video that I just put up about the scarab beetle, I'm finding some fascinating subject matter on the colorization of these beetles. Now, what I'm talking about is circularly polarized light. In other words, the light is made of structure. The color is made of structure, not of pigment. Now here's one amazing example of how this is demonstrated. This is a berry, and this berry has some of the most intense color in the world. Why? Because the structure of it is like millions of tiny mirrors reflecting light back at you. When you change your position, your viewpoint, looking at these berries, it can actually change colors. Now, there are some diagrams here that demonstrate how this works. Light comes in through a surface material, reflects off of an internal material, and comes back at your eye. Now these can be layered in several layers with different plants and animals throughout God's kingdom. Here's another example of how this works. Multiple layers, single layers. But there always seems to be one rule. A background of dark pigment is necessary for us to see this. The backdrop. And that reminds me of the night sky. Now, how did we find this? How did we stumble upon this? We were examining the scarab beetle and noticing how the reflection, the structure, the makeup of the night sky at the equator, spinning in opposite directions to your left and right view, but going straight up and down in the middle at the equator of Earth, was similar to the makeup of the scarab beetle and also the images we are given by ancient Egypt. And we noticed how there were two lenses depicted in what we are shown that seemed to mimic the spoon reflections. So we have a spoon here, the inside of a spoon, and a spoon here, the outside of a spoon. And when you look into the outside of a spoon, we'll just imagine that this is it here, we notice that this image of the scarab beetle seems to mimic the image that we would see in the night sky of the spoon. Now I'm explaining this further because this was a little confusing on the last video. I understand that sometimes we need the commentary to go along with the explanation of this. But this is the night sky seen at the equator. Let's minus this, and maybe this will be a little easier to understand. Right in the middle of the sky, at the equator, the stars move in one direction, vertically. If you were to use time-lapse photography over the course of the entire night, they would move perfectly vertically in the sky. But when you look to the right in the sky, remember, standing in the equator, the stars will move in a circular direction. But when you look to the left of the sky, they move in the opposite direction as the stars in the right of the sky. So we deduced that maybe we were seeing some kind of reflection. And that's when I began to look into the spoon. And when you look into a spoon, one image is concave and one is convex. And when you look at the convex spoon, it flips your image. You can try this with any shiny silver spoon. Look at it and the image is flipped, but when you flip the spoon around, you see yourself right side up. So then I began to think and search, which is what we do on this channel, for the truth. We might not get it right, but we are searching, presenting the synchronicity so you yourself can decide what the truth is. That's what this is about. And I realized something very bizarre, that this scarab beetle, we are seeing a spoon here and a spoon in this direction here. So we're seeing this image, this same thing, in which spiraling something this way would move it in one direction here, but if you flip the spoon around, it would move in the other direction. And if you were standing directly in the center, it would be perfectly vertical. And that's the amazing, fascinating thing about this scarab beetle and how it's depicted here in this ancient artifact and many hieroglyphics with two opposing spoons, images, which of course gives us what we would see in the night sky, which simply blew me away. The majesty of God's creation. Now, back to circularly polarized light. Let's take a look. Now, when we say circularly polarized light, that reminds me of what we are seeing in the night sky at the equator, in which a backdrop of complete darkness is necessary to make out this structural light, according to this man here. The backdrop, the final layer of darkness, is needed, and that is outer space. Now, how does this work? It works with films and thin layers, the upper water firmament, and how light is reflected. We talked all about that in a couple videos ago. And this is amazing. This is the fractured surface of some of these films. And when the light shines through and shines back, it structurally gives a different color. Now, pigment works in much of the same way, except that it only reflects back one color. That's the difference between pigment and structural color. Structural color uses its structure and reflection like a bunch of tiny mirrors to block and change what your eye is seeing. So from different angles, the color can change. It's simply amazing. Now, the scarab beetle has this quality. It's one of the few animals in the animal kingdom that can do this most efficiently. These berries also fall under that category, as well as the peacock, some squid, and they're actually trying to use this technology for camouflage in the military. They're developing it right now. It's also used by the insides of seashells. That's where we get the seashells, and we've done some work on the heliotrope that is derived from the Hexaplex trunculus seashell that makes a purple, a royal purple, and a royal blue color. Now, here are some other examples of animals in the animal kingdom that have varying degrees of this ability of circularized polarized light. And what this does is it further implicates those in control, the evil one, of knowing this knowledge, knowing what is going on, but hiding this information from us and trying to use it to elevate themselves as gods, the ancient Egyptians, namely. We see this in their hieroglyphs. They knew the secret, and almost in every instance, we see the two lenses, with this one giving it away, with the bottom lens being the opposite side of the spoon. You'll more easily understand this by using a spoon and looking at the image, highly polished spoon. And this will tell you what the night sky is doing. They give themselves away because they think that we're not smart enough to figure it out. And the evil one wants to be like the Most High. Now this links all the way back into the work we did on Nut, the sky goddess, the canopy of stars. Another example of them trying to take credit all the way back to ancient Egypt for the masterpiece of God's work. And then the people being subjected to that because they are worshiping the false gods, the people that didn't create this, but the ones that are trying to take credit for it and seeing this as awe and wonder. And this is what enrages the Most High, because the people that are in subjection to the ancients were sacrificed, killed in war. The war god Wepwawet, who delighted in sending men on through to their deaths in the cycle of the Ouroboros.
Now this is going to blow you away, and I believe that we are very close to the ultimate truth.
As for what it would look like, first, you would see your face quite clearly. As you moved away, at a certain point your face would cease to shrink away in the mirror and instead would grow larger and become magnified until you reached the center, at which point your face would fill your field of view. To the center, your image would flip upside down and continue receding away. It would look a bit like this. But don't get too enamored with your reflection, because mirrors don't show you as you really are.
And now I want you to imagine that you were standing inside the mirror sphere on the flat, dome-shaped Earth, and that the equator would be a central circular line around the lens of your eyeball. And at that point, you would see perfectly the night sky. And that as you went up in the northern latitudes, the sky would start to spin inside the mirror sphere in one direction. And as you went down in the southern hemisphere, towards the edges of the ring of the dome Earth, the sky would spin in the opposite direction, because the sky is a giant mirror. And now we can begin to understand why the ancient Egyptians used the sign of Ra's eye as their symbol, because the middle of your eye holds the secret to the universe. And this is the night sky at the equator, the central part of the lens of the eye, circumnavigating the very middle portion of this bulb. And I believe that this quite possibly could be the answer to all of our questions, you guys. The only way to reproduce this experiment is to make a giant room that is shaped like a mirror, and make a platform shaped like this lens, and to stand on it at different points, to stand here and see if in fact we are seeing the image, and then to stand at the top and see if things are spinning in one direction, and then to stand at the edge and see if things are spinning the opposite direction. And I believe that if we can do that experiment, that we can then prove the structure of the universe. Take care and be safe, you guys.
Remember I told you that I believe that we live on top of this convex lens Earth, and that this is the narrow gate back to heaven, the silver cord, the hyaloid canal. God is amazing. And if in fact we do live on top of the convex lens of the inner eye, then in fact there should be some kind of analogy to an eclipse. And lo and behold, there is. What I want you to do next is I want you to close your right eye. And I want you to stare at the L on your screen. And I want you to move your screen closer or further away from your eye, and you will see the R disappear as you were staring at the L with your left eye and your right eye closed. You just witnessed an eclipse of your eye. Now, why does this happen? It is because there is an area called the optic disc. It is where all the nerve fibers come in through the back of your eye. And curiously, blue bloods don't have this blind spot because their nerve fibers enter behind the rods and cones, whereas ours enter in front of the rods and cones. More confirmation. But this is what causes the blind spot. The absence of rods and cones to pick up the image, and your brain can trick your eyes into seeing the images. But lo and behold, you have a blind spot, as we just demonstrated, an eclipse of the eye. So I decided to take this further, and I realized that the disc is exactly what an eclipse is. It is a disc. And when I dug deeper, I was simply blown away, because there is such a thing as a crescent of the optic nerve head, as you're seeing right here. Yes, it is a crescent moon. So now we have what you're looking at here is what seems to be an eclipse in progress. At the base of your eye, where the hyaloid canal, the narrow gate, would have entered this exact spot. And there is where you will find the truth. As we've just demonstrated, the road to everlasting life is narrow. The gate is narrow, and few find it. And this is the eclipse of the eye. And the eye Earth model is now nearly complete. All of the naysayers can no longer deny the truth, because the lens of your eye is a prism. The lens of your eye is a prism, not a prison. It is a prism. And when you look at the eye and the lens, when the light comes through, it shines a rainbow prism pattern. We live on the convex lens Earth. This is the rainbow that we see in the sky when standing at 42 degrees. 42 degrees, 42 generations from Abraham to Jesus Christ. And now we know what the rainbow is, because a rainbow can only be viewed at 42 degrees. And here we see the trochlea, which is the little open book. And we see the nerve angle at approximately 42 degrees. The 42 degree angle of light from the lens, pointing us forward within to Jesus Christ, the crossing of the optic nerves on the cross. We finally found the ultimate truth. This is our universe, standing on the convex lens Earth, the stars fixed in the firmament around the inner eye. It's all come together now, you guys. And here we are. And I get to share it with all of you. And one thing is certain. Thousands of years ago, Nobody knew what the inside of the body looked like, the inside of your eyes and brain, except for God and the Son of God. So let this be a testament to the true God, the God of our Bible, who describes in detail in Revelation 10, as we are about to cover, exact dimensions of a viewing angle of a rainbow, encoded in the book of Revelation, sealed up until the last days, until this very moment. I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. He had a little book open in his hand. And now we know what the little book is. This is a 42-degree angle that I am placing on top of this image of the trochlea, which is the open book here, and the nerve. This is the angel coming out of the east. And when we place this angle on here, we see the truth that 42 degrees is in fact the angle of the nerve. Now the scripture goes on. It says here, and he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. We see that as well with this muscle here, as it rotates around the entire eye. Part of it is on the sea, the vitreous humor, and part of it is on the land. But this goes on even further, because then cried out with a loud voice as when a lion roars. When he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices, and a rainbow has 7 colors. The 7 thunders. And he said, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, and do not write them. The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heavens and the things that are in it, the earth, the things that are in it. And you see here, when he raised up his right hand to heaven, this is exactly what we are looking at here. And the sea and the things that are in it, that there should be delay no longer, but in the days of the sounding of the 7th angel, when he is about to sound, the mysteries of God would be finished, as he declared to his servants the prophets. And they shall tread the holy city under foot for 42 months. So now we know what the angle is. The angle of the angel, the 42 degrees of the rainbow. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud and a rainbow upon his head. And its face were the sun, and its feet were pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little open book. And he had set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot upon the earth. Now these other 4 bands of muscles coming in around the eye are the 4 angels at the 4 corners of the earth, with the 4 winds mentioned in Revelation. But this other angel coming out of the east fits the description of this muscle exactly. The little book is the trochlea. The trochlea, a bone that holds in this muscle here. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth,
lifted up his hand to heaven. Lifted up his hand to heaven, the hand holding the book. And now we begin to understand where we live. Right here. coming together over the last 3 years and sticking it out to try to find the truth. And with the last video I just uploaded, we see that it could very well be possible that we are living inside of the shape of God's eye, with the lens, the backside of the lens, being the shape of our earth, a hill, and the equator being halfway from the top of that hill to the bottom, and then at the bottom being the Antarctic ring. And that from the equator perspective, the reflection that we get on the night sky could in fact be the reflection of how the stars travel at the equator, and that would make sense in a giant globe mirror that would be surrounding us around that eye, around that lens, and that globe mirror being the retina of your eye. So I decided to look again to the Bible and think of all the verses talking about the eye, that we were made in God's image, and that maybe that means that we were made inside of God's eye. And I thought about all of the other verses in the Bible that talk about the eye, how we will be transformed inside the twinkling of an eye. And maybe that twinkling isn't God's twinkling of his eye, in which the whole universe might exist, and that how the devil might want to hide this information, because if we knew that the stars above us and the earth below us was shaped like an eyeball, that we might find the truth, and that the truth could set us free, and we would never again doubt our Creator. And I think about the verse in Enoch. It talks about the skies above made to glorify God and to prove his creation. And when I think about that and what we just discovered, that makes perfect sense. Let's look at some more Bible verses about the eye and see if they fit in to what we just discovered. And when we look through the lens, pun intended, of the Bible with this thought in mind, everything I just described, things are seen in an entirely different perspective. That when they ate of the tree, their eyes were opened, and they should be like God's, the image of God's eyeball. And that the tree was good for food and pleasant to the eyes. And they repeat over and over the eye in the book of Genesis. And both of them, their eyes were opened, and they knew they were naked. And we think about what could be meant when Jesus said, "Let your eye be single and your whole body be full of light." And that he could be referencing the fact that if we understand that we live in the single eye of God, then we will understand the truth. And that when Jesus said that when our eye is single, that our whole body would be full of light, that when we understood that God is the eye that we live in, that our body is full of light, and that is when we become a star in heaven. But when their eye is evil, their body is full of darkness, which could be like the black holes of the heavens, those who do not have a star. And we can also see that the tree of life that she ate of, that Eve ate of, could be the retina at the back of the eye that looks like a tree. And that by eating of it, her eye was opened. And now I'm going to blow your mind, because if in fact we each have a star in heaven as the book of Enoch tells us that we do, then could it be that the light coming in God's eye through the front is projecting our own life and brilliance onto the backdrop of the retina of our night sky, our universe that we see? And however brilliantly we shine on this earth is a direct demonstration of our stars in the sky. Could it be? Could it be? And when God kept Israel as the apple of his eye, we might be able to see what he's talking about here. And we think about Samson, whose eyes were put out. And we think about the blinding of one's eyes, and the fact that when people begin to die, their eyes grow dim. And we begin to understand that maybe this is the truth that we've all been kept from. And now we can begin to see other truths through this truth. That we are born in God's eye, in the womb. And that the placenta is like the retina. It is the image of God. And that the child is upside down. And our brain becomes the earth. And that the placenta nourishes our new soul. And that God is projecting from the outside world. And that is how conception occurs. Through the lens, through the glass. And this is why the cervix of the uterus acts much like the lens, dilating and contracting. And we find scriptures like Psalms 11:4, that the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids try the children of men. And that the light could be shining through from the eyeball. And as we said, projecting the stars onto the retina of what we see as space. This is simply amazing. And the apple of the eye being the focal reflection or light source going in through the front of the eye, where God's throne is. And that when we ask God to be in the apple of his eye, which some of these verses state, that in fact we are wanting to be in God's favor. And it explains why the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. And we begin to understand the as above, so below, that if God's throne is the light projecting through the lens, our stars on the heavens, as each of the righteous has their own star, according to the book of Enoch, that if that is the case, then also the light traveling through the lens of earth, it becomes our reality. When we think about physics, and that dust and light are what make up our reality, we see creation all around us, and that all around us is God. It is the manifestation of his handiwork, projected from his light, from his love, through the lens and onto the surface of our planet. And then we are projected through our righteousness onto the ceiling, so to speak, of the canopy of stars. And when we consider for a moment the star spin at the equator, with the stars in the middle running vertically and the stars in the southern hemisphere running clockwise and the northern counterclockwise. And if we contemplate for a moment that the glory of God comes in through the lens, through the bottom of our feet, into creation, and that our stars are projected onto the surface of the black sky.
BCE, Solomon knew the inner anatomy of the human eyeball. And here he outlines the exact inner structures that nobody knew about in 300 BCE. Remember now the Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh. When thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened.
Looking out the window of the iris being darkened, that's your pupil constricting, the grinder's wheel, grinding the wheat into flour. The wheat into the flour. What does that really mean? Wheat are seeds, and all seeds have flowers. And the grinding of those flowers into the dust is the symbolism of where we are and how we've fallen. Our flowers no longer blooming but being ground into dust. And maybe this is why they call this the cornea, because it's the grain of corn, and we never get the full picture because we're each locked in our grain silos of information, and no one ever puts the complete picture together.
And the doors shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low, also when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish. And the grasshopper shall be a burden, and the desire shall fail, because men goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Or ever the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. Then shall the dust return to the earth, as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it.
And something strange happens here with the prophet Nahum as he talks about the stars of heaven and the locust crowned with what? And thy captains as the great grasshoppers, crowned as the locusts. And he talks about the circadian rhythm of day, the cold day, but then the sun riseth and they flee away. This is the serotonin, melatonin, circadian rhythm. The shepherds slumber and not knowing where they are. What does all this mean?
The place that they know not of where they are, is here on earth, going from dust to dust, recycling within the prison, acting as great captains and kings. All is in vain. Thy people scattered in the mountains, and no man gathereth them. So, this series of verses seems to point back to our pineal connection to the stars. Our star in heaven that represents our beacon of hope to one day return, and our spiritual connection to the Most High and His Son. The median ocelus of the grasshopper, of the locust, the third eye, right in the pineal position. We hear it talked about in Nahum as it relates to the stars of heaven. And as Enoch says, we each have a star in heaven. So now we begin to put together the pieces of what all this might mean. And it's simply fascinating. Now, it's interesting because the ocelus, this third eye, we talked about the circadian rhythm of how your pineal gland is regulating the melatonin and serotonin dance. As you go to sleep at night, melatonin is released. You fall asleep, the serotonin peaks during those hours, but then pulls you back out of the melatonin release as you're in your waking hours. And this is the rhythm that we're all locked into. We're also locked into the rhythm of the recycled dust, sleep and wake, as we all exist in this prison reality, in the dimension of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But it's interesting because there's an animal named after the ocelus, and that is called the ocelot, an animal that spends its entire existence at night. This is the ocelot, and if you think these have no relation to one another, you're sadly mistaken. Now, the people in the occult know about this animal. Very famous people have had these animals as pets, and they are nocturnal animals. Why is this animal named after the third eye of a grasshopper? Salvador Dali, what does he know? Christ said, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is dark, your whole body will be full of darkness. And something else I found that was interesting, that is unexplained, that in all these images of the grasshopper hind wing, they all seem to have 14 segments. 14 segments. Why is it that these grasshoppers have 14 segments on each side of their wings? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Why do all these grasshoppers have 14 segments? Well, 14 and 14 is 28. And that is the moon cycle. Again, another circadian rhythm, another cycle embedded into the story of the grasshopper, locked in this dimension of cycles, the recycling of life and death. And as Nahum put it, not knowing the place that we are in, thinking we are king grasshoppers and crowned locusts. And maybe this is what these
number of wings of this grasshopper is all about. The moon cycle, the 28 days, and also the 28 days encoded into a woman's menstrual cycle. And this is the reminder of where we are and where we're at. So now we understand the secret of the locust and the grasshopper. They become the mask hiding the true nature of heaven. Locusts are depicted in the Bible as typically negative things, representing the futility, the circadian rhythms, locked, chained the rhythm, the prison that we live in. And all of that brings us back to the cicada, which is the same word minus the R as circadian rhythm, which has a life cycle. A cycle, the recycling, as we keep telling you about, the dust, the circadian rhythm, all of these are cycles. And this is the cicada. And as we've told you in previous videos, you have a layer of honeycomb matrix just under the cornea of your eye. This is it. These are the scales that fell from Saul's eyes in the Bible so that he could see. And an amazing revelation of the detail of the iris of your eye shows the truth hiding in plain sight as you begin to see the reflection of this honeycomb matrix hiding just beneath the surface. Look at this. This is fascinating. These are the snake scales. This is when sin entered the world. Eve's eyes were opened. The scales that we look through out into the material world, hiding in plain sight all this time. This also becomes the cistern wheel. The cistern wheel. They knew the inner workings, the complexity. There's no way they could have known this in these ancient biblical texts without a microscope. But here it is, right here. This being one of the best pictures depicting the serpent scales, which is why Jesus Christ had to come, die for us, to correct our blood. Take care and be safe, you guys. Another amazing revelation that confirms the detailed knowledge of the inner physiology that Christ had. He knew much more than people give him credit for. Instead of acknowledging that, many choose to find other pathways to everlasting life. But we're going to show you in the Bible tonight how Christ had a very deep knowledge of the inner physiology of the body. And I'm shocked that really no one's found this information yet. What you're going to hear tonight is simply new information. I may have covered this a couple of times before, and I want to thank the subscriber who asked me to look at the scripture that we're going to cover tonight. Now, this physiology that Christ knew is very specific science of how your body's systems work. And that is the definition of physiology. And it's how these different body systems work together on a microscopic level. Tonight, we're going to look at the miracle of the man with congenital blindness and how he was healed by Jesus. Now, of course, congenital blindness means someone born being blind. And there's a very specific scripture in the Bible that talks about this miracle. And there's much more to this miracle than meets the eye, no pun intended. Now, this is fascinating. We're going to talk about neuroimaging, or how the brain in a congenitally blind person actually maps out his or her surroundings. And the other senses in their body can actually pick up the slack, so to speak, as the brain is rewired. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how even in a completely blind person, There's this inner light that can be measured in a brain scan in its activity in the visual cortex where there should be none. Now, what is the visual cortex? We're going to have to go into some basic physiology for you guys to understand this, okay? This area at the back of the brain here is the visual cortex. This is the area where vision is processed. We have to basically follow the pathway of light here to see what this is all about. Let's open this in a new tab here. Oh, that image is not going to work. Too dark. All right, here we go. See if this one works. So what you're looking at here is the pathway of light coming into your eyes. Let's blow this up here. And what you have is the light comes in. This is why this video came under attack before we even went live, with more thumbs down than it had thumbs up. They don't want you to know this information. We're going over science, their own science, their own studies to prove that Christ is real, okay? And they do not want this information out there. The light comes in through your eyes. These are the two thieves at the crucifixion at the sides of Christ. Here's the cross where Christ was crucified. Now, to understand basic physiology, you have to understand how all this works. Why would the two thieves at the side of Christ be, basically mapped in your human body? Well, it's because God knew the plan from the beginning. And when we fell, when we sinned, our body's physiology changed, but it also included clues pointing back to Christ. It's always been within us, the proof of Christ, this whole time. This is what they don't want you to know. So here's the cross where Christ was crucified. This part is called Abba. It is called the optic chiasm. Abba is Father. It also represents this crossing. It's called the suprachiasmatic. It's actually called the optic chiasm, which basically means taking two things going in and then those two things coming out. Much of the Bible is actually mapped out and written in this way, where you go in and you come out. And when you write that out in a shorthand form, or you write that out in a outline form, the description of what a chiasm really means, instead of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you have A, B, B, A. A, B, and then B, A. It crosses over in the middle. Now, you can't make any of this up. Nobody could connect all these dots. Therefore, it is not me doing it. This is universal knowledge of your inner physiology to prove the one and only true God who created your human body, so that you could relate this back to Christ and understand that he was real and understand who the only true God is. That's why this information is so important. So, where Christ was crucified, he said, Abba, Father. Now, when the light crosses over in the middle, it feeds into what is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is at the center of your brain. I'm going to show you a quick video of that. This is it here. Let's turn him off. Light comes in through your eye, through the retina. It is then fed to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is at the center of your eye. That then feeds information to your pineal gland, which regulates the light in your body. Okay? And we're going to talk about the inner light versus the outer light. There are two different kinds of light. Casey, how can you say that? Well, in a person with congenital blindness where no light should be registering within their brain, we see activity lighting up in the rear of the brain where the visual cortex is, where light is processed This is firing in somebody that has no perception of light. That is called the inner light. And in the Bible, where Eve's eyes were opened, that's where we figured out that something changed. And she was visually able to see that she was naked. Before that, they saw in a different way. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. This is deep truth. Hopefully, I can make it as simple as possible so you guys can understand. Make sure we're connected. We are. Good. So we're going to talk about the true inner light versus the false outer light of the world. That's why there were two morning stars, the morning star of Lucifer and the morning star of Christ. He is the inner light. Now, the first clue that tipped me off about this is when Eve sinned and her eyes were open. She knew she was naked, as I just said, possibly suggesting that if we were to take this verse literally, that before that point, she saw in a different way. And as we go over the physiology of what happens to light when it enters the human eye, we follow this pathway of light. And this is called the circadian rhythm, what I just described to you. And so what you have is this light regulating your sleep and wake cycles. The light comes in, it's processed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus at the center of your brain. It sends a signal to your pineal gland, which turns on and off the melatonin. Now, this is fascinating. They found that blind people have higher serum levels of melatonin because the lights are shut off. So their brain is bathed in this sea of higher serum levels of melatonin. Everything I'm telling you tonight is science, and I'm going to link all this back in to this verse in the Bible. And you're going to see how Jesus knew exactly the science of how all this works. Now, they found that blind people have very low rates of cancer. And they won't make a causal link to this, to the melatonin levels, the high serum melatonin levels, but it is noted, it is proven that blind people rarely get cancer. Now, this is fascinating to me because no one is talking about this stuff. Make sure we're still connected up here. All right, let's keep going with this. And so I pulled up some studies. Let's let this load up here. Congenital blindness occurs an estimated rate of 0.03% in people born in the 70s and 80s. So congenital blindness is relatively rare. Here's the study talking about visual cortex activity in early and late blind people. As I showed you in the model, visual cortex is at the back of the brain. And there should be no brain activity. But according to the study, brain imaging studies describe visual cortex activity in blind people during non-visual tasks, such as braille reading. Why would their visual cortex be firing up during braille reading? Even when they hear words or sensory discriminations of tactile and auditory stimuli. It's almost like their brain is rewiring itself back to before the fall, before our bodies and physiology were different. Simply stated, loss of vision does not lead to permanent inactivation of visual cortex. These counterintuitive findings support the notion of altered capabilities for survival modalities, the reorganization of cortical functions. There are two possible mechanisms for modifying activity in various parts of visual cortex blind people. One is that the changes constitute de novo cross-modal plasticity. So this is just a fancy word for Everything gets rewired through when you're sensory deprived. And what's amazing is all parts of the brain pick up the slack. This is fascinating. Here's a study on the functional neuroimaging of sound localization. This is how blind people actually can map their surroundings using whatever senses they have left. Audio. They even found that the tongue picked up the slack. Let's see, where'd that study go? The tongue as a portal to the visual cortex in congenital blindness. In this paper, we show that the absence of vision since birth, the brain adapts and allows extraneous information coming from other senses to compensate for the lost sense. We provide scientific data showing that the tongue is a viable organ to transfer electrotactile information to the visual cortex in the visually deprived brain. This calls for a concept termed sensory substitution and refers to the replacement of a lost sense by another one. Now, people that are blind actually see the world differently. Pull up that study here. People who have been sighted and then become blind use an allocentric reference frame. So this would be like basically at one time you could see, and then all of a sudden you became blind later. Meaning they remember locations as they are positioned relative to one another. The same way someone who can see does it. In contrast, people that are born blind preferred egocentric reference. So these are people that have never seen an object before. They were born this way. They first remember a starting point at home and then store a memory of the locations from the home location. Now, when I read this, it gave me chills because this home location is like our Father in heaven, home. But once the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, and we see, like Eve did, everything changes. We start seeing things in relation to one another. We start seeing things divided instead of from one home. So I wanted to show you guys these studies, and now we're going to get into the verse, but I had to set the groundwork for how all of this is going to relate to the verse that we're going to read. Let's close up some of these windows here. All right, here's the verse. Now I hope you're sitting down because this is unbelievable. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So they were asking him, why is this man being punished? Why was he born this way? And Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be manifest in him. And everything I just described to you were the works of God manifest in a blind person, how their brain is rewired and remapped. Then he goes on to say, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. This is the circadian rhythm. Light and dark ruled by the serotonin and melatonin in your pineal gland, in the position at the cross where Jesus said, Abba, Father, at the optic chiasm. Now, here's what they don't understand about the way this works. The more resistance we are met with this information only makes me better. You're better off leaving this channel alone, because all that's going to happen is I'm going to get better and better and better, not because I'm anything, but because God wants this information communicated. And it makes me realize I'm just a vessel. And if I screw this up, then I'm not doing the glory that God deserves. So all this does, when we're heavily trolled and they're thumbsing down these videos, it just makes me try harder. I'll never give up on God. I'll never give up on Christ. I'll never let New Age replace Christ as long as I'm breathing. It goes on, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So when Christ came, he stepped out of the pineal position. He came into the world and he became the light of the world while he was in the world, just as the verse says. But then he returned to Abba, the Father. He crossed back through the chiasm on the crossing optic nerves at the cross between the two thieves and returned to the Father. Let that sink in for a second. Let's keep going. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. Now, to put this in perspective and to understand exactly what he was talking about here, he covered the eyes of the blind man. He basically blocked the vision of his eyes with this clay. Why would he do that? Well, God formed a man out of the dirt, out of the clay. And Jesus was reforming this man's vision by shutting off his outer vision so he could have inner vision, so that he could see him. Now, people are probably asking, Casey, this is deep. These people didn't know any of this back then. Of course they didn't, because these are the scrolls that are to be opened in the last days. Now that we have the science, now that we have the increase in knowledge to understand this stuff, this is it. We now have the ability to know the deep secrets, to know who the one and only true God is, to know who his son is. And we had to combat this because the darkness, just as Christ said, the darkness is here. But the truth about Christ is the light that shines. The night cometh when no man can work. What does that mean? Well, it's like a black Sabbath, the 7 years of the tribulation, 7,000 years since the beginning of man. We are in the black Sabbath. It's coming. The end of days, the darkest hour before Christ returns. Everything is reflections and opposites with this stuff. Christ was explaining the circadian rhythm, the dance between the light and the dark, the serotonin and melatonin. He is the light. The pineal, which is just an antenna in our bodies, but in the spiritual realm, this is the model or map of how things work in the universe. And it was mapped into our bodies so that we could find the truth one day. And the pineal gland, of course, regulates the circadian rhythm. It receives the light and dark stimuli. When it's dark, the melatonin is released. And the way this whole scripture is mapped out, the way it's structured, they first ask about blindness. Then Jesus talks about light and dark. Then he talks about him being the light of the world while he's in it. So it's basically telling you the pathway of light. And it's telling you about the pineal and how it came forth. It was sent into the material world. He came from this position into the material world, down to our world, where we see in a different way, in the material world. And he was crucified. And then when he left, Lucifer took back over with the false light, because Lucifer is the light bearer too in the material world. And he told Eve to open her eyes so he could deceive her. It's all there, you guys. So these verses talking about the covering of the eyes, okay? Locking out the light, leaving only the inner light. And as we demonstrated to you, this inner light is active in even people that are blind. This is what cured the blindness. And this dust that he grabbed from the ground was the cursed dust. But Jesus uncursed it by spitting in it in his hands. You notice he uses the hands that would have a nail driven through them later. Because his sacrifice is what is the healing. Okay? I'll say that again. When he picked the dust up from the ground in his hands and anointed the man's eyes, his hands, the sacrifice of him is what heals us back to true vision, inner vision. And I have a special place in my heart for people that have no vision, that were born blind, because they're born without the anchors of the stuff that a lot of us experience. Okay, the visual things that we have to experience in this life, shiny new cars, attractiveness, all this crap that gets in the way of the truth. And as we demonstrated to you, their brain is remapped. It's almost like they go back to the original plan. And as the verse says, so that the works of God should be made manifest in him, the blind person. You never see blind people depressed about the way that they were born. They deal with it. All right, let's keep going with this. Studies show that the occipital cortex is still blind, or is still active in blind people, which is what I showed you. Even though these people can't see, they have an inner light. Why? Because, as Christ said, the works of God are displayed in them, that the inner light exists. This becomes the rainbow spectrum of color. These are God's rooms with many mansions back here for each one of us. As this basically fans out into the rear of the brain. This part of the brain is called the tree of life. I bet you didn't know that. The cerebellum, just underneath this, is called the arbor vitae, which is in Latin the tree of life. And now we understand that there is an inner rainbow and an outer rainbow. We live in a realm of duality. So that's pretty much what I had for you guys. I wanted to share that with you. We've talked about bits and pieces of this before, but relating it back to this verse is pretty amazing. Now let's finish this up. After Jesus made a clay of spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which by interpretation means sent. Exactly what Jesus did. He was sent. Father, Jesus, pulled him out, went into the world, sent him forward. Then he came back, was crucified. He went his way, therefore, and washed and came seeing. So this washing is like the baptism. Now, hope you're sitting down for this. When the man had the spittle put on his eyes and he went to go wash, he came back here. This is called the cerebrospinal fluid. This is the well that never runs dry. It is the cerebrospinal fluid that bathes your brain and spinal cord. It never runs dry. This is the inner waters, the inner baptism, born again with the Father and Christ. So the man went into the pool and he bathed, which was basically baptism. And then he came seeing. The neighbors, therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. But he said, I am he. So he was different. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, which means sent, and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. So that's it, you guys. Let's pull up the chat here and see what is going on. Hopefully a mod came in, because I know we got trolled tonight. Here's what I have to say about what's going on in the truth community. Jesus was with 12 disciples, of course, and disciples had moments. One of the disciples cut the ear off of a soldier. So it was a real act of violence. And Jesus healed the soldier. But then that disciple went on to do great things and help point people back to Christ and save people. Christ didn't turn his back on that soldier. He didn't turn his back on that disciple. He didn't crucify him. Okay. The disciple didn't do anything any less than any of the other disciples and apostles did after Jesus left. They all went on to spread the word, except for Judas, of course. So sometimes people get upset and they lose it. And that doesn't disqualify them from loving God and Christ. So I know Carl had a moment last night, but I defend him because he just reminds me of the disciple who cut the ear off of the soldier. And that's pretty much what I have to say on that. It happens sometimes, you guys. People have no idea what we deal with. Come onto a live stream and there's already 11 thumbs down and 10 thumbs up. These little games they play before I even said a word. We get death threats. We're attacked daily. Just empty threats, lies circulate about us that are not true, that some people believe. They have whole clubs of people that sit around and just talk about us, spread lies. We're called shills every single day, even though we know we're not shills. shared every aspect of my life with you guys, but yet I'm still a shill. For no reason. They have no proof of anything. They just throw out these attacks. So sometimes you hit this boiling point. A lot of it too is in defense of Christ. We're sick and tired of seeing him trampled in the mud in the same way that the apostle cut the ear off of the soldier. He was mad at what Jesus was going to have to go through. He didn't want to lose his Savior. He wanted to stand up for him, and he thought the way to do it was to fight with a sword. We also have a passion for children. We have a passion to defend the innocent. And when we're attacked daily, sometimes we lose it. Okay? That's just human nature. And I'm shocked at what some people will be horrified of when we have horrors in plain sight, real horrors that I can't even talk about because it would be censored. I can say 58 million since 1973. If you don't know what I'm talking about, do a Google search on that. Roe v. Wade. Horrors hiding in plain sight that people just forget about. I'm not telling you to go down and protest and all that. That's not going to do any good. This is a spiritual battle. There's nothing you can do about it. Or the daily bloodshed of these false wars. Or the mind control operating in plain sight in Hollywood on every single TV show, every single commercial. Or children just out of the womb being influenced by all these ideas put in their head to think, to not know what they really are in this life. They're put on drugs of all different types that affect them in all different kinds of ways. These are the real horrors. Not somebody getting mad at someone who's been harassing them and wanting to beat them up. That's light compared to what's going on in this world that everybody ignores. This is why I get so passionate about this stuff.
So I was thinking back to some fond memories when my children were small. And we always used to look forward to the fall, because that was the time where we could get out the warm clothes, dress up, and make our first trip to the pumpkin patch, where the kids would run around in the straw. And I always remember commenting to my ex-wife how the light had changed, and that could she notice it, that things fell just a little bit differently on the trees and the plants and our reality. And it all seemed to happen on one day. Now, it's easy for us to talk ourselves out of that and say, well, maybe it happened gradually and I just didn't quite notice it. But thinking back throughout the years, I don't think it was in my head, and I'm going to show you why. Now, this is the UN map. We're going to get into the book of Enoch today, and how Enoch describes a flat path of the sun. He describes gates rising up and shifting like a gear shift. Not a gradual, but shifts, actual shifts. And that could explain the change in light that happens in the fall. Now, it probably happens in other seasons, but we just don't notice it. Infinite heavens. God is reflecting back at us, but we'll get into all that. But first, I want to address this. Extrapolating this image out, we're looking at the owl. Now, don't run away, because Satan wants to be like the Most High. He wants to establish his kingdom on this earth. So what he does is he takes the miracle of God, and I'm going to show you from the book of Enoch how the sun actually follows this owl path, and I believe it's in a figure 8. But see, the devil wants to mimic God, have you not believe in him, and worship him here on earth, and uses the signs and symbols to do that, to control your mind,
and confuse you. But there are way too many synchronicities within the Bible for all of this to be evil. And I believe in my heart it is not. And I woke up this morning feeling like I did when I was 4 years old. And I knew I had a toy waiting for me when I would awaken. I literally feel like I've been transformed after learning this knowledge. And I hope that you feel it too. So the book of Enoch, and we'll get into that, travels in this path. It says that it rises up through the north to reach the east gate. Now we got to think about reflections here and how this works, and we're going to pull this apart today, and I'm not sure what we're going to find, but we're going to dig. But first, why would Satan choose this image, Moloch? Extrapolate all this out. Think about where these curves go. And that's why we've been led on this journey. Now, Satan didn't create the stars and the movement of the stars. So we have to ask ourselves, why would he choose the owl, knowing that someone could figure this out? Because life is a giant process. And thanks to the subscriber I was brainstorming this with yesterday. As we go up toward the heavens, everything gets less dense. It's like a giant arrow pointing toward God. We start in space, the vacuum, down to the upper atmosphere where there's little oxygen, a little less dense. Then we get to the air, more dense. Oceans, more dense. Earth, more dense. Rocks, more dense. And finally, molten rock. Hell, which is the most dense. That is what Satan is trying to recreate on this earth. Do not sacrifice your children to Molech in the fire. Satan has his own little hell here on earth, and he requires sacrifice. But fortunately for us, our Creator does not require that. Let's get into this, you guys. Now, here we are at the equator. This is Kenya, Africa. And the first thing we noticed in a couple videos ago is that the sun is moving at the exact same speed as the stars behind it. Now that should be impossible, because the distance from our Earth to the sun is like holding your hand in front of your face. Your face is Earth, your hand is the sun, and then the next nearest star being literally New York City, from wherever you're at, unless you live in New York and pick a further distance. 260,000 times further away. And we are right here. The sun is right up against us. And we are told the stars are way further away. So how is it that the sun never gains ground on the stars and that it's always on this sheet of stars, following the stars? Well, the amazing thing is Enoch tells us that the sun is attached to the stars. Now, how would he know this is the question. He knew it because he was shown, and he tells us that he was shown by the angels. He says, I saw the winds which turned the sky, which caused the orb of the sun and of all the stars to set. It's all on one wind. And over the earth I saw the winds which support the clouds. That's a second wind. He describes all this in the book of Enoch. That's exactly what we see in the night sky. Cannot be denied. I'm showing you right here. So then I got into more about the sun and its path. And I must admit, I got a little confused, because it says that the sun comes up through the north to get to the east, but then it sets in the west, comes up through the north to get into the east. It sounds like it's going in two different directions and doesn't fit really any models. Doesn't fit a globe model, doesn't fit a flat earth model, and it really doesn't fit the dome shaped model, the lens model that we've been looking into. So
let's get into that because I think we figured it out. So the secret is revealed by following the stars, right? Because we just showed you how the sun is attached to the stars on that wind. So we follow the path of the sun. Now this is the northern hemisphere. This is the southern pole star, the southern hemisphere. This is the equator. North, south, east, and west is in front of us somewhere, but we don't see it. So Enoch says, the sun sets in heaven and returning by the north to proceed towards the east is conducted so as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. So included within the path of the sun is heaven. Now let's try to wrap our brains around this. And this verse 8 is key. And that is what we're going to pull apart. The sun sets in heaven and returning by the north to proceed toward the east is conducted as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. And now we are going to get into some ultimate and profound truth. Here we are inside your eye. This is the back of the lens. The yellow dots are the equator. And as we've outlined, when you're standing on the equator, you see the stars going straight out from you at the equator. And when you look to the northern hemisphere, which is right here, they start to spin clockwise. Now remember, the sun is on this wind. Follow me on this. When you look to the northern hemisphere, the stars are spinning the other direction. And I want you to look, if you're standing on this equator and you're looking down, the stars are spinning in the other direction. And look at the reverse rings. Can you now see the truth? And all this is a reflection on the backdrop of this large disco globe, the internal mirror. This is how God does it, and it's amazing. Because He's right back here behind this retina. He's the pineal gland. He is the ultimate, the Alpha and the Omega. Now, think about the sun being on one of these tracks. We'll use this ring. Rises up through the north. To rise in the east. Do you see how this works? It's reflections and rises up through the north to return to the east. Rises up through the north to heaven to return to the east. And as it projects down onto this lens, it creates a perfect ring. And so Jesus asked His followers, and now I ask you today, do you have eyes to see and ears to hear? The eye and the ear are the two witnesses of God's creation. A flat ring, a projection, rises up through the north to return to the east. And this is simply fascinating. This is another first truth bestowed by the Holy Spirit. Simply amazing. And here are the words of Enoch regarding the sun. The sun sets in heaven and returning by the north to proceed towards the east. Sets in heaven, here's heaven, returns by the north to proceed to the east. And even though it's doing this motion, it reflects down onto this surface, our earth, We're on the outside of this contact lens. And this is what we see, and we're seeing it right now in real time. Because the sun, remember, is affixed to the stars, and this is the star pattern we see in the sky. And Enoch continues on. It talks about that the sun is instructed to do so that it can illuminate the face of heaven. And that's exactly what we see in this model. In the same manner goes forth in the first month by a great gate. It goes forth through the fourth of those 6 gates, which are at the rising of the sun. And in the fourth gate through which the sun with the moon proceeds in the first part of it. There are 12 open windows from which issues out a flame when they are opened at their proper periods. And these are our solar flares. And I can almost bet you that if you or one of these channels that tracks the solar flares, BP Earthwatch, if you were to look at where these flares are coming out of on the surface of the sun, you would probably notice that they only come out of 12 holes. Because this is what Enoch has said, because he was shown the secrets of heaven. Then the sun rises in heaven. It goes forth through these fourth gate 30 days. So it goes through each of these gates for a period of time. And the gates that it goes through are the 6 gates. The 6 gates of the UN model. And again, because of the reflective effect of the retina in the back of the eye, the globe internal mirror, even though the sun is following the star paths in that figure 8 pattern, it reflects down on Earth as a ring, and it follows each of these gates. There are 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're showing us their dominion over the secret knowledge here. This is Rome. That is the 6th gate. How do the seasons work? Well, when the sun is on this gate, it never quite gets to the North Pole, so the North Pole stays cold. But in their summer, they see the sun all day long and all night. It never sets as it rotates around them. During their summer, we are experiencing our spring. Do you see how this works? When it goes in through the next gates, this is our summer because it is over the top. The sun is in this next ring over the top of the northern hemisphere. But when it is on this internal ring going right over the Arctic Circle, the people in Antarctica don't see the sun. It stays dark for months at a time because the sun is so far away. Remember, this is all mirrors and gates. And the same thing applies as the sun progresses on each track. And that's why you sense a shift in the light. Because God is controlling the sun coming in and out of these gates. And that is the truth. And the sun goes on proceeding through its gates, as Enoch outlines here, lengthening and shortening the days. How does that work? Well, we go back to our map, and the days get shorter as we don't see as much of the sun. Let's give you an extreme example. It's summer in the southern hemisphere. The sun is in this track directly overhead, warming this portion of the sky. And the sun is in its full glory as it's going through this ring just away from the outer edge. Well, the people in the northern hemisphere,
are not going to see the sun as brilliantly and as brightly. And in fact, standing on the lens, that sun is not going to be in the sky for as long as it is for these people as it rises and sets because of the angle of the rays of the sun. And that's about as simply as I can put it. And that is how we get our seasons. And ultimately, this is what we see when projected down. But as I just demonstrated to you, it follows the sheet of stars. Just think of it as a reflective effect and know that what Enoch says is true, that the sun passes through the glory of heaven each and every day. And God has the ultimate power over these heavenly bodies. And so you see, the earth is neither flat nor round. And what way for the enemy to confuse and confound, knowing that the prophecy of the last days would come true, that knowledge would increase? What better way for him to confuse and confound than to create the black and the white, to create the flat and the globe, all the while the truth right in the middle on a contact lens surface. Both happen. The sun goes up and down from heaven to earth, as well as side to side from our point of view. Simply unbelievable. Anyway, you guys, take care and be safe and be blessed. All the glory and credit goes to the Creator. Some of you have asked me to look at the book of Joshua. Now, Joshua means upright one. It is not actually a person in the Bible. It means upright one. There are several biblical references in Samuel of the book of Joshua. But I found this site also that talks about how there were some scribal errors that were carried over from the Masoretic text, which only indicates that the book of Joshua was in fact inspired of God. Now, you'll have to do your own research on the book of Joshua outside of what I'm providing for you here, in terms of its accuracy and in terms of its divine nature, and if in fact it was supposed to be included in the Bible. But here again, twice it is mentioned in the Bible, the book of Joshua. So what I wanted to do today was talk to you about some amazing discoveries that we made in the book of Joshua. Now, Enoch, it talks about Enoch's transfiguration to heaven, and that he rode on a horse 7 days as people followed him. And each day some would turn back, but he knew he was going to go to heaven. He knew it. And by the end of it, it says here that on the 6th day some of the men remained and clung to him, and they said to him, "We will go with thee to the place where thou goest. As the Lord liveth, death only shall separate us." And he urged them not to go with him, but finally he stopped speaking, because he knew that nothing he would say would prevent them from coming after him. And then he was transfigured, but here's where it's pretty amazing. On the 8th day, all the kings that had been with Enoch sent to bring back the number of men that were with Enoch in that place from which he ascended into heaven. This place was a snowy place. The earth was filled with snow, and upon the snow were large stones of snow, and I believe that this is the outer ring of Antarctica. This is where Enoch went to go under, outside the dome, through heaven, through a gate. Now, this is not a physical gate, most likely.
Your righteousness determines whether or not you pass through. And apparently Enoch had that righteousness. It says here that the men remained with Enoch are dead, and now under the stones of snow. And they searched and could not find Enoch, for he had ascended into heaven. To me, this is fascinating because this is everything we talked about, the inner earth model. The inner eye, the convex earth with the lens above it, the cherubim swords of stars spinning, blocking the way to the tree of life. And Enoch found a way past the cherubim because he was holy. So after Enoch was transfigured into heaven, the men thought that they might try to break through the stones of snow to find Enoch. Okay, so they were trying to break through into heaven, but everything was in vain because Enoch was gone. And then we get the rest of the story as Methuselah took over and had righteousness on the earth and ruled over it. But then toward the end of his life, the sons of men turned against the Lord, and they corrupted the earth. They robbed and plundered each other and rebelled against God. This is just before the flood. This is the rest of the story. There was peace on earth before the flood, before all of this happened, during the reign of Enoch and his son Methuselah. The Lord grew angry and continued to destroy the seed in those days, so that there was no sowing or reaping on earth, so the earth was barren. And now you see the connection of what they were trying to demonstrate in the film Noah. They showed the barren earth, nothing would grow. And it had confused me up until this point, but now we're reading in the book of Jasher, and we actually see what they were trying to depict there. And along came Noah, born to Lamech, son of Methuselah. And Noah came to give rest. Why? Because Noah would bring the flood. The flood to flood over the cursed land that God had cursed because of the sin of man. Man was rebellious in those days. Methuselah was perfect and upright, but men departed from the ways of the Lord, and they taught one another evil practices and continued sinning against the Lord. And every man made unto himself a god, and they robbed and plundered every man and his neighbor and relative, corrupted the earth, and the earth was filled with violence. They took wives by force, and they taught the mixture of one animal species with another. And this is where we get some of the ancient hybrid animals that we see in the hieroglyphs. And they were trying to provoke the Lord. The whole earth was corrupt, for all the flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. I believe this is where the dinosaurs existed. This is a description of the dinosaurs. And it says here that all of the men that walked in the ways of the Lord died in those days. So God took them before he would bring evil upon man, which he had declared for this was from the Lord, that they should not see the evil which the Lord spoke of concerning the sons of men. Noah found grace in the sight of the Lord. Then the Lord chose him and his children to raise up the seed from them upon the face of the whole earth. And it was in the 84th year of Noah's life that Enoch the son of Seth died, and he was 905 years old at his death. Then the Lord told Noah to go and speak to the people, and he gave the people 120 years to repent, that the Lord would not exact his judgment if they would only repent. But they were stiff-necked, and they would not listen. And 120 years went by, and then we had the flood. And God chose Noah, who was perfect in his generation, to raise up seed from his seed upon the face of the earth. And this was the perfect seed that he was talking about. Not perfect in his actions, but perfect in his seed. It tells us right here. It tells us in the book of Jasher. Because Noah at first was saying he didn't want to have children, and God said, you will have children, because I need your seed to carry on the seed of my son, who will be the Savior of the world. And in one more amazing act of mercy, God caused the whole earth to move violently. He darkened the sun and shook the earth, and the foundations of the world raged. Lightning flashed and thunder roared, and all the fountains in the earth were broken up, such as not known to the inhabitants before. He did this mighty act to terrify the sons of men, that there may be no more evil upon the earth, giving them one last chance. And still, after all that, the sons of men would not return from their evil ways, and they increased their anger of the Lord at that time, and did not even direct their hearts to all of this. Then God opened the waters of heaven. The waters of the flood were upon the earth, and all the fountains of the deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And in the last days now will be just like the days of Noah, as 700,000 men stood outside the ark, asking to come in. And Noah says, have you not all rebelled against the Lord, and said that he does not exist? And that is exactly what's happening today. People are saying he does not exist.
So, several almost complete copies of the Book of Enoch in Aramaic were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. What were the Dead Sea Scrolls? They were discovered in 1947. We're going to look at these copies of the Book of Enoch that were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. We're going to look at these copies, and we're going to look at how old they were. And we are going to look at how they actually even matched up with the Ethiopic texts that were already in existence, proving the Ethiopic text validity. And so what does that tell you? It tells you that the Ethiopians had it right all along, I mean, including the Book of Enoch into their canon. We're going to prove that to you. We're also going to get into the 7 mountain ranges, the 7 rivers, the 7 continents, the 14 evergreen trees that Enoch spoke about, that no one seems to want to talk about. But he actually predicted the entire world. He knew what it looked like. So we're going to go ahead and share screens right now and get into this simply fascinating information. I'm glad you guys are here and you guys have a love of the truth tonight to be able to get into this. All right, we're presenting right on. Give a couple shout outs. I see everybody in the chat here. Thanks you guys for showing up. Now I've got some notes pulled up because I didn't want to miss a beat with this. And we're just going to get right into this. Enoch talks about the 7 rivers he beheld upon earth, greater than all the rivers. Now I've got this graphic pulled up because I wanted to show you guys exactly what Enoch was talking about, okay? To the 7 major river systems of the world. Let's see here. Where are we at? 7 rivers I beheld upon earth, greater than all rivers, one of which takes its course from the west into a great sea. Its river flows. Let's look at some maps on this. So the only river that the large river that takes its course from the west would be the Amazon. 2 come from the north to the sea. Their waters flowing into the Erythraean Sea on the east. What 2 rivers of the world, 2 river systems of the world flow from the north to their sea, to the sea? Well, one of them is the Mississippi, and one is the Ganges, flowing from its north into the sea. The one in the east is flowing to the Erythraean Sea. Of course, the Mississippi does not. but it's delineating that here. And with respect to the remaining 4, they take their course in the cavity of the north. The cavity of the north being, in my opinion, the basin, basically this whole top portion of the world. See how these other ones are differentiated. So they've got the Yangtze, this Russian river system up here. Here's the Yangtze flowing in the cavity of the north as well, which is in China. We have the Nile and the Tigris Euphrates. And that accounts for 7 of the major river systems of the world. Now, this doesn't include every single river system, but these are the major ones. The maximum amount of cubic feet of water flowing through them. It goes on to differentiate and to give you a little bit more information on these river systems. To their sea, the Erythraean Sea, I'm thinking is the Nile, Tigris, Euphrates river systems. You got to remember, this whole area in here was called the Erythraean Sea. They didn't have the names like Arabian Sea, the Mediterranean. This whole area was considered the Erythraean Sea. 2 poured into a great sea, where also it was said there's to be a desert. So it's differentiating out of these last 4 that they're mentioning. And I believe that these 2 that pour out into their desert would be the Yangtze and this Russian river system. I don't even know what to call it because there's so many rivers that flow into this northern Russian river system. So what you have is the Siberian desert that defines the Yangtze and this Russian river system. Great Siberian wilderness flowing where there's said to be a desert. Now, how Enoch knew all this just fascinates me. Let's make sure we're still connected. And let's see here. What else do we have? So what's up with the Dead Sea Scrolls? And I hate to have to do this on every video when I'm talking about the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls, but we have to do it here. The Dead Sea Scrolls, again, were discovered in 1947, yet the book, the canon of the Bible, was not updated. Let's take a look at the Book of Enoch. Where did I put? There it is. And the Dead Sea Scrolls. Enoch. Now, of course, it says here 30% of the texts from the Second Temple period, which ultimately were not canonized in the Hebrew Bible, like the Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilees, Book of Tobit, Wisdom of Sirach, Psalms. It's actually a piece of Psalms missing from your Bible, but that was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yet nobody wants to know what those say. They just trust the Bible that we have today. This is the entirety of the contents of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And as you can see, 40% were the Hebrew scriptures. And then all this other stuff was included in there. Now, these are very old copies of the Book of Enoch. Cave 7. They divided this discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls up into caves. They were in the Qumran caves, discovered by shepherds, Bedouins. And they divided them up because each cave had a major discovery in it. These were very old copies of Enoch dating back to 200 BCE. That's 200 years before Christ walked the earth. Again, this copy of Enoch was included in the Ethiopian current Bible, but yet apparently Christianity does not want to recognize that. Cave 7, they found a Greek copy of the Scroll of Enoch. Where else did they find Enoch? In the Qumran cave Dead Sea Scroll discoveries. There are 4 privately owned scrolls from Cave 11 that have not yet been made available for scholars. Among them is a complete Aramaic manuscript of the Book of Enoch. Because this is an Aramaic, it predates the Greek copy that we just told you about. Aramaic came first, then Greek. This is a very old copy, 200 BCE or older. So this is what we're dealing with. But yet, people like me are crazy for recognizing the Book of Enoch. Why? You have to ask yourself, is it because you've been brainwashed by your religion to dismiss Enoch and you're not thinking for yourself? You see, they have a house of cards, and the house of cards is that they know that Enoch was supposed to be included, but because they missed it, they're busted. And everything else that they do is now being called into question. They would have been better off acknowledging all of the findings of the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of these works that were found, and updating the Bible and saying, look, this is God's Holy Spirit revealing all truth to us. The Council of Nicaea got it wrong. They were the ones who canonized the Bible. And now we're going to write it. But you see, they can't have that happen because it would undermine the Catholic religion, which were part and parcel of the Council of Nicaea. Those are the beginnings of the Catholic religion. And it would expose all of the lies. So this is the biggest cover-up in the history of spirituality and Christianity. And I'm going to go on now to further prove to you that Enoch knew the undiscovered world. Think about that for a second. I just showed you the 7 major river systems of the world. Here is a very cool, see if it works. Animation of what Enoch already knew. How did Enoch know? It wasn't because Enoch was like the coolest guy ever. It's because God divulged this information to him. No. So that it could be written down so that we could know who the one and only Most High God was. These are the 7 major river systems of the world. There's your Russia. There's your Ganges River and your Yangtze River. There's your Nile and Congo River Basin. There is Amazon and the Mississippi. Now, there are other smaller river systems, but when we look at the watersheds of the world, there are 7 basic watersheds. Just as Enoch said, let's close this up. What else did Enoch say? He talked about a mountain range. This is fascinating. There were 7 mountain ranges. 7 high mountains I beheld, higher than all of the mountains of the earth, from which frost proceeds. So these were snow-capped mountains, while days, seasons, and years depart and pass away. And this map shows the 7 highest mountain ranges in the world. This is unbelievable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now again, this doesn't account for all of the mountain ranges of the world, but I think you can see that Enoch knew what he was talking about. Now, here's the slam dunk. Make sure you're still connected. The slam dunk is that Enoch also knew the 7 continents. This is unreal. 7 great islands, he calls them, in the sea and on the earth. 7 in the Great Sea. And I had closed it, but we all know that there are 7 continents on the earth. And so there you go. Now, let's close this up. Enoch also talks about 14 evergreen trees. How did Enoch know there were 14 evergreen trees? They consider and behold every tree, how it appears to wither. And every leaf to fall off, except of 14 trees, which are not deciduous, which wait from the old to the appearance of a new leaf for 2 or 3 winters. Now, this is true. If you look at evergreen trees, they go 2 or 3 winters before they get a new leaf. And there are 14 evergreen trees. I found this article talking about the general types of evergreen trees. And here it shows it here. This one shows 15, but 15 is very close to 14. And many of these types seem to overlap and overlay. They probably have subtle differences in, their descriptions and stuff like that. But in general, there's about 14 different types of evergreen trees. Now, for Enoch to have known this is unbelievable. Sorry, guys, woke up late, trying to drink some coffee, a little slow. We're going to get through this, though. Let's blow this up. Get a closer look at these types of evergreen trees. Now, there's going to be a day of reckoning with this knowledge, okay? They can't run from this. The Dead Sea Scrolls basically exposed modern Christianity for what it was, which is they're hiding the true information, the true knowledge that leads to a stronger faith in God, salvation, and things of that sort. They're hiding it. I don't want you to know these truths. They want to be the spiritual brokers. They want to have control, money, power. They basically created a club. That's what religion has become. It's become a club. And they're all fighting to get you in their club. Okay? That's why they have all these denominations. And this is hiding in plain sight. So that is the truth behind the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Book of Enoch. You can dig into this further if you like, or many people are going to continue to buy the lie, believe their pastor when they say, well, if it wasn't in the canon, that's because of divine intervention and God didn't want it in the canon, because if he wanted it in the canon, it would have been there. Well, my answer to that is that God said in the Bible, Jesus said, beware of scribes and Pharisees, changing the Bible a jot and a tittle. Why would he put that warning in there if it never was going to happen? God knows the beginning from the end. Why would he not do that? So that's where everything sits, you guys. See, these are all my videos. See, all this information's gone. The links, here's a link to my video from my old channel that now, obviously, that channel has been deleted. So all this work we did is gone. Now I'm slowly re-uploading it and you guys will get to see it, but you can see how the information from Enter the Stars was all over the web. You couldn't have that. So anyone is linked to it. Let's see, watch, if you click on it, the video is unavailable. This was my video. So this is how they hide the truth, but we won't stop. We are not going to stop, you guys. I was talking to Mark and he was telling me that one of the first people on the scene with the Dead Sea Scroll discovery was the Catholic Church. Of course, they're busted. They canonized the Bible. They for sure wanted to see what was going on with the discovery in this cave that I believe was ordained by God. Okay, so here's 2 and 3. Behold, he comes with 10,000s of saints to execute judgment upon them, destroy the wicked, and reprove all the carnal for everything which the sinful and ungodly have done and committed against him. That's biblical. You're going to find this in the Bible. So that's irrelevant. Let's look at chapter 3. All who are in heaven know what is transacted there. They know that the heavenly luminaries change not their paths, that each rises and sets regularly, everyone in its proper period, without transgressing the commands which they have received. They behold the earth and understand that they are transacted from the beginning to the end of it. They see that every work of God is invariable in the period of its appearance. They behold summer and winter, perceiving that the whole earth is full of water, and that the cloud, the dew, and the rain refresh it. Okay, so there's nothing weird there either. It would contradict anything we just talked about. So 2 and 3 are fine. Now, you never know. There could be something in this where the Catholic Church didn't want anyone to know. So they didn't want that idea reinforced. Right? So we know that the Ethiopic text has it. And they were called crazy up until the Dead Sea Scrolls were found with the Book of Enoch in it. So they got basically vindicated. The Ethiopians who had this complete book of the Bible with all the books in it. Okay? And something fascinating has just been revealed. Let's follow the path of pregnancy through the wilderness with the Israelites. Except it's all in reverse. From birth, going backwards to conception. The pregnancy that would last 40 years in their journey and 40 weeks in the human womb. Let's start with the last of the 10 plagues, the Passover of the firstborn. Remember, God spared only those whose posts were marked by the blood of the Lamb. The post and lintel represents the entry into the beast system. And here now you clearly see the post and lintel is encoded in the United States Post Office logo, hiding in plain sight all this time. Everybody is postmarked in the beast system. You're identified by your address, the headdress of the Sphinx of Egypt. That is how they keep you in control. But the good version of that is being marked by the blood of the Lamb. And this is how you are passed over into Christ's fold. Only through Christ's blood are you spared. Birth, firstborn. Now, going in reverse, the narrow gate, the birth canal opens through the Red Sea. Of course, this is when the Red Sea was parted and the Exodus happened, the birth. Remember, we're going in reverse. Blood and water, the Red Sea, dilation of the cervix. Before that, the water broke, the Red Sea split. And we see clearly that the Nile Delta is shaped like the woman's birth canal, exactly where it should be. We are all born into bondage, born into Egypt. Going back even further, we see the desert of sin. Right here between Elim and Sinai. This is where the Israelites ate the manna. This is just like what a child would receive in the umbilical cord. Manna, not real food, simply nutrients This is the fasting in the womb. And then, at the halfway point of pregnancy, the 20th week, we see the tip of Sinai, where the 10 Commandments were written by the finger of God. But they weren't written just once, they were written twice. That's 20 altogether. The halfway point of pregnancy, the 20th week, 20 commandments. Going back further at Gilbroth, we see the quail here. I think that's the fluttering of the child in the womb. Before the halfway point of pregnancy, you feel the child moving inside of you. And as we continue to travel back in time, we see the serpent who infected the woman. Yes, the copper serpent. This is it right here. On the pole, God made Moses erect this as punishment for the Israelites' murmurings and longing to be back in Egypt, back in bondage. And that brings us back to the beginning, the birth of sin in the world, the conception of the beast. And yes, even the yeast fits in to all of this, the yeast that causes the bread to rise. Unleavened bread was the requirement of the Passover because it removes the yeast which is present in the birth canal of women. It's called a yeast infection. And even that was part of this whole birthing process. It's all there. And now you know why yeast is taken out of the bread, because that is the sin that entered the world. But there's one more thing nobody else saw in the history of the Bible in the spiritual realm. And that is that when you look at the pregnant stomach of the woman in the Sinai Peninsula, this is the womb. You see the child, inverted, ready for birth, exactly where it should be. Here you see the head of the child, the arm coming out, the eye, the face, the child curled around here in the womb, ready for birth, through the birth canal, through the Red Sea, the parting of the Red Sea, exactly where it should be. And here in Egypt, you see the serpent or the beast crouching at the door of the womb, exactly where it should be too. And the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Agapa look like the two legs of the woman outstretched, ready to give birth. 40 years in the desert, 40 weeks in the womb. Take care and be safe, everybody. There are some very encouraging and uplifting words in the book of Enoch. I think we're going to close tonight, if I can find it, with the reading of these very encouraging words. Because there is a plan for the faithful. There is a plan for the faithful. And that plan is that those of us that endure until the end love one another, treat each other right, do the right thing, even when it's hard to do. That we will inherit everlasting life. And that those who trample upon us, they will also get their due. Okay? And it's not going to be pretty for those people. And I wanted to read that to you because when I first read these words, I was in tears because it is that powerful. And maybe this is what they didn't want you to know about the book of Enoch. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. Ye withered in heart, no peace shall be to you. Therefore your days shall you curse, and the years of your lives shall perish. Perpetual execration shall be multiplied, and ye shall not obtain mercy. In those days shall you resign your peace with eternal maledictions of all the righteous, and sinners shall perpetually execrate you. Shall execrate you with the ungodly. The elect shall possess light, joy, peace, and they shall inherit the earth. But you, ye unholy, shall be uncursed. Then shall wisdom be given to the elect, all of whom shall live, and not again transgress by impiety or pride, but shall humble themselves, possessing prudence, and shall not repeat transgression. They shall not be condemned the whole period of their lives, nor die in torment and indignation. But the sum of their days shall be completed, and they shall grow old in peace, while the years of their happiness shall be multiplied with joy and with peace forever, the whole duration of their existence. This is the promise of the book of Enoch.